I start dissection, I have to face the screen. All right? You guys can keep your eyes up there. If there's something I feel like you can't see, I'll turn around and try to hold the piece up. But afterwards, I'm going to put the pieces that I can't take out on these sheets. And hopefully, all of us moms and tutors can take pictures, and then you can look at it when you get home if you want. All right? So I'm going to get started. You guys ready?
She's making her own.
All right. This is our specimen.
Ooh, it does look like hamburger.
I see
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
This is a baby pig. You are right.
Oh my gosh, it was.
But that's okay. That's okay.
I've seen a baby pig dissected.
You know,
I've seen a sheep.
it's a natural part of life for life to end, right? So that's okay. God has it already planned in. Thankfully, through Jesus Christ, our life doesn't stop here, right? When our bodies end here, we get new bodies and we spend all eternity with Jesus. So we don't need to be afraid of that, right? All right. Look at that. All right. We're going to start with our very first organ. Can you guys tell me what you think that is? It covers the whole body.
The skin.
Skin. It's a part of the excretory system, right? Do you guys remember that?
Yes,
Looks like a face.
Our skin
it's real.
protects our body, and it's also when we sweat, right? It helps us release that pent up heat in our bodies. Okay? So we have the mouth, right? We have the nose, that's part of the circulatory system. Respiratory system. Right? I think we're talking about that today in week 10. Pig's nose is called the snout. Look how extended it is, right? When we go into the mouth, can you see the ridges up top? Hard ridges. If you put your tongue behind your teeth and feel the top of your mouth, you'll feel that it's pretty hard. That's called a hard palate. As your tongue runs to the back of your throat without banging, you'll find it gets softer. That's called our soft palate. Right back here. Right? Here's our tongue, which I did take out.
What is that? The tongue?
Oh,
In the front, we see these little
That's kind of cool.
little tips of fingers. That's where our taste buds are. We've got a little bit back here as well. Our tongue is a muscle, right? Right? So I'm going to put that on my piece of paper under the mouth. Okay? Now as I open up the mouth some more, this is my probe. It helps me to move pieces aside and point to it. We have two tubes that are in our throats. One tube, the trachea. Do you guys remember that? That is also known as our windpipe, right? On top of the trachea is a strong piece of tissue. Let me see if I can get to it. It's a flap. It's called the epiglottis. That folds over our trachea so any food or water doesn't go down the trachea and into our lungs. The second tube next to the trachea is called the esophagus. That's our food tube. It leads right into our stomach. All right? That does not have a flap. The food and water just goes straight down the esophagus into the stomach. All right? So, let's talk a little bit about the nervous system. Protecting the biggest part of our nervous system is what part of the skeleton? The skull. Here's a piece of the skull I was able to take off.
wow.
It's so hard, I had to use an old steak knife to kind of saw through it. Okay? All
cranium,
skull,
fur. Yeah,
the
and then your
ribcage, the sternum.
ribs, and then your
The ribs are
sternum. Good job.
protected. Yes, the ribs are a protection, right? I'm going to try to open the back up here. Can you see this little bit of ridges? It's kind of hard, but it's there. This is a part of the spinal column, right? That's part of our axial skeleton. We have our skull that's protecting our brain. Our spinal column, that's like, it contains, it's not one long stick. It has round discs like this that stack on each other. There's a hole in the center, and running through that hole is our spinal cord, right? That's part of our nervous system with our brain, right? So that spinal column protects our spinal cord. Let's go back to our brain for a moment. Every organ in your body is surrounded by a thin tissue called mesentery. That thin tissue helps to keep your organs in the general place that they're supposed to be. So your organs move a little bit, but they don't go too far. Because can you imagine if your small intestines ends up behind your lungs? That would be kind of hard to digest your food, right? So the brain also has a special tissue running all around it. It helps protect it in the skull. Because as we walk, our brain moves a little. We don't want it smashing up against our skull because the tissue is very sensitive. So we have this piece right here. You can see that. Okay? If I take that tissue off, the pieces of the brain will start falling off like this. Right? But let's look at this side. Now we can clearly see the grooves of the brain that we see in pictures. Can you see that? Yeah, pretty cool, right? At the base of our brain, if you follow back here, it's a little bluish. There's our cerebellum. And just under our cerebellum is where our spinal cord starts flowing through our spinal column. All right? So that's how our axial skeletal parts and our nervous system work together. Now we cannot see nerve cells or skin cells without a special object called a microscope. And we need a really special, strong and powerful microscope to actually see nerve cells. Okay? So let's see, we talked about that. Now we're going to start our internal, I found an eye. Mrs. Badger is so excited. So now I'm going to turn over my buddy. She is a girl able to do that, to find that out. And I'm going to open her up. I already dissected some of it to save time. So right here, enclosing our lungs and our hearts, can you tell me what you think this is? Can you see that? Here, let's try this one. Rib cage. Yes, it's the rib cage. And the front of the rib cage is connected by what part? Begins with an S. Sternum. Yes. So I was able to cut through using a pair of sturdy scissors. Now these are all dissection tools that come in a kit. So if you decide, with mom's permission of course, to dissect, please don't get the kitchen scissors. Get the ones that come in your scientific kit, okay? Now these are very strong, so I kind of had to break them apart. And on the inside, you really get to see more of the rib cage. In between the rib is more muscle tissue, okay? So, this is the good part. You ready? We're gonna first identify this big organ in the middle. Does anybody have an idea of what this giant organ is? The heart, very good. The heart is your body's the strongest pump it has. Your heart has to pump blood all the way down to your feet. So it needs to be pretty strong. And it also needs to be a muscle. So when you go out and you exercise and you really get that heart working, it's like doing weight lifts for your heart, right? Inside the heart, so that the blood with oxygen and the blood without oxygen don't get mixed up, there are 4 rooms, if you will, in the heart. It's kind of challenging to see here, but they're called chambers, all right? The red and the blue you see is a special dye injected into this body so that we can see blood vessels more carefully. Red and blue represent the arteries and the veins, all right? So this pig has a whole lot of blood in its heart, right? This big pink piece represents blood that was in a blood vessel, all right? So the blood moves through the heart in a certain path. So it either goes to the body or it goes to the lungs, right? So we now need the lungs super close to the heart. I'm going to try to take the heart out. Oh, baby, look at this. See if I can get this. Right here, do you see this thick tube? That's the aorta.
Wow.
Look how thick and big it is. It has to be super strong to get that forceful pumping blood, that large amount, out of the heart and to the rest of the body. And as the blood vessels go throughout the body, sometimes they get smaller and they spill, or they are attached to capillaries. Do you remember hearing that word? Which are much smaller blood vessels. Right here on the top, which looks like leaves, you can open them up a little bit. These are the atrias, the first top 2 rooms of the heart. And let's see if we can see it some more better. Inside, you'll see 2 more rooms down at the bottom. These are our ventricles. Super important. So I'm going to put this heart right under our circulatory system, which we'll be talking about some more today. All right, so now we need the lungs super close to the heart, right? So that the heart can move the blood that has carbon dioxide, that's our waste that we breathe out, into the lungs to be expelled by our mouth. We also need blood to go to the heart that has picked up its new passenger, oxygen. So, in our pig, these pieces right here are our lungs. So I'm really going to get in there and flip them around, right? You see that piece right there? Is that clear? Right here? Those are our lungs. There are 2 lungs, okay? It looks like it's more, but it's not. Right underneath our lungs, I had to cut this tissue. Right underneath our lungs, resting above this big piece called the liver, is a special piece of muscle that helps us breathe. It begins with the letter D. Does anybody know what that is? Our diaphragm. That protected and sealed up this whole cavity, but its primary purpose is to help in the process of breathing. So I'm going to cut that tissue out. Trying not to cut the lungs. Let's see, I'm going to put it here under the lungs so that you can see how thin that is. Now I'm going to take out the lungs. That's just right above the liver. Let me see if I can do that without severing. Oh, look at that blood vessel. I am so excited, guys. I'm not going to have pork chops for a while, but there we go. So now we're emptying out the I believe it's called the thoracic cavity. Is that right,
Mhm.
Miss Karen? I think so.
I think so too.
Here we go.
Wow.
These are more blood vessels. The blue and the red again are blood vessels filled with a special substance called latex so that they are not flat and we're unable to see it. Oh, I don't think I have it. Oh, here we go. All right. Remember I said we have two strong tubes that run down our body, through our body. One is the trachea and one is the esophagus, the food tube. Well, we know because this has some colored dye in it, we know this is the giant blood vessel that runs the length of our whole body. Okay? This tube right here that I'm lifting with my probe, we're going to find where that ends. If it ends in the stomach, then we know that's our esophagus. Okay? So first, we have to move our liver. When we look at the pictures of our liver, it looks like one giant piece, right? It's actually made up of smaller pieces, and those smaller pieces are called lobes.
Wow.
Okay? So underneath our liver, which has a huge function, several functions actually,
That's big.
it is pretty big. It covers the whole abdominal cavity. Here's a huge blood vessel that leads
Wow.
to the liver, right? Underneath our liver is this green sac. Does anybody know what this green sac does? This is called the gallbladder.
Oh.
The liver makes makes bile, and it's stored in the gallbladder. Bile is a special liquid that helps your body break down all the butter and cream cheese and fats that you eat. So the bile, the gallbladder is attached to the liver, but it has another cord that I had to cut that attaches itself to the stomach. Okay? And the gallbladder, I'm going to try to cut that out, releases the extra bile into the stomach to help digest it. All right, did I make a spot for a gallbladder? Yes. There's our liver, our gallbladder. We're going to put our liver, a couple of the lobes, right here on our paper. All right, so now we're going to follow this down. Can you see this giant sac?
Wow. Like a balloon.
Yeah, it looks like a balloon. This is the stomach. And if we look, this tube right here leads all the way into the stomach. That's how we know this is the esophagus, right? So your stomach begins the chemical digestion of your food. You've got stomach acids, you've got bile, and inside your stomach muscle, it's all a muscle, is coated with thick mucus so that the stomach acids don't eat away at your stomach muscle, all right? So while in the stomach, there's a lot of crunching and pushing and mushing around so that by the time your stomach is done doing its job, what is pushed out of it is something like, it's a paste-like substance. I actually kind of envision peanut butter kind of consistency. And it then gets pushed from your stomach into your small intestines, which looks like noodles to me, right? Does it remind you of noodles?
Tasty.
So scientists, on a side note, scientists have this weird, quirky thing about relating things to food. I don't know why, but it just makes sense to us. So I'm going to cut out the rest of the liver so we can get a better access to the stomach. Oh, before I take out the stomach, I want to show you the spleen. Do you see that?
Mm.
Looks like a long tongue, right?
It does.
This is the spleen. Can somebody tell me what the spleen does? Oh, can you say again? The spleen helps in our lymphatic system, right? We just learned about that last week, right?
Mhm.
Our lymphatic system helps us to fight off bacteria and viruses and foreign particles we call antigen that comes into our body. It's like our army of protection, right? The spleen also takes care of old blood cells that can't do their function anymore, right? So also, under the stomach, we find our pancreas. Well, not our pancreas, her pancreas. It is kind of a strange looking. It looks like layers of grain or small rocks. It is, what does our pancreas do? Do you guys remember? That takes care of, one of the things it does is it helps monitor how much sugar we have in our system. Now, I mean, anytime we have a loaf of bread or some rice, that is broken down into its most basic form, which is a sugar, right? And so that pancreas helps make sure that we don't have too much or too little, all right? That's one of the things it does. Let's see. I can see it's very tender and easy to break apart. That's located next to the stomach, and it is under the liver. Where did I put my pancreas? Did I not? All right, I'm just going to put it right here. All right. Next, we're going to move right into our small intestines. So I'm going to cut out our stomach. We're almost there, guys. You guys are doing so wonderful. Everybody stay put? Good. Let's see.
Stomach right here.
Thank you. There's our stomach. Now, our small intestines does a lot of the absorption of the nutrients and water that is in that paste from our stomach, right? That's a primary spot of gathering those nutrients for our body and cells to use. Now, our small intestines, when it's done doing its job, it moves the paste into these larger intestines. Do you see that? They're thicker, they look like fingers, right? After the large intestine does what it needs to do, it pushes the paste, that food paste, which is now waste because we don't need anything else from it, through this thick canal, which is still a part of the large intestines, down through to the rectum, and all the way out to the anus. You guessed it. And that's how we get rid of our food waste. So I'm going to cut out that because I want to show you how the small intestine stays so curled up. Remember I was talking about the mesentery tissue that really holds and surrounds each and every organ? Well, that tissue, ooh, I'm fogging up my spot. I'm so excited here. I'm breathing heavy. We see that special tissue right here. Inside that tissue, if you look at it, you can see pink tubes, some blue tubes running out to and from it, these small intestines. That brings the blood that we need to keep our small intestines healthy, right? We talked about blood carries nutrients and waste out from the body, right? So that those blood vessels go everywhere. So now I'm going to take out our large intestines, okay? It is all curled up as well. You see that? It's thicker, it's bigger, hence the name large intestines. That's also kept together in a coiled position based upon, because the tissue is holding it together, right? All right, we're going to move to the last part of our dissection, which is part of the excretory system. We are going to look at the kidneys. Remember, the kidneys are bean-shaped.
Oh, I see.
Now, this piggy has big kidneys.
Yes.
These are the kidneys,
Wow.
right? It's a baby pig, so its bladder still needs to be formed, right? So its bladder is not quite the size we expect it to be. Can you see that? It's right here in between these tubes. Do you remember the name of the tubes that connect the kidneys to the bladder? The ureters, right? They go from the kidney to the bladder and then out the bladder through the urethra. And that's where we urinate, right? That gets rid of our liquid waste. So I cut out a kidney and let's see, is this clear? How's that look, guys? We have, this is where the ureter connects, and we have two blood vessels, renal blood vessels, an artery and a vein that supply the kidney with all that it needs. We open it up, and inside in those spaces, that's where the nephrons are, if I got that right. And that's where the filtering of our liquid and fluids happen. And then whatever left over the body doesn't need goes down through the bladder, okay? I'm gonna put that up here. I'm gonna cut out the bladder. I'm gonna leave the ureters attached. Now again, the bladder should look more like what we see in the pictures, but because this is a baby, it's not really fully formed yet. All right, I wasn't able to take out the spinal column because that's a pretty tough thing to do in the short amount of time that we have. All right, so I wanted to, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, maybe afterwards. This is the throat. See that hard lump right there? It's hard, I can tell you. We open it up and we'll find the larynx and the pharynx in there, okay? And I think
The brain.
that's about,
Brain.
yes, let's look at the brain again.
Maybe.
We've got our skull I cut open, right? And here's our brain tissue, surrounded by that protective film of tissue. I'm gonna flip her over. Go around underneath our cerebellum and our spinal cord right here. This might be easier to see on pictures or if you have time to come up and take a quick look. Right?
Thank
So
you.
thank you guys so much